A lot of audio feedback. Oops, it didn't start quite away. Da-da-da. Okay, so the last time I tried this, I ended up having a lot of audio feedback accidentally and probably ruined the entire thing. I ended up deleting the video because I didn't want to listen to 30 minutes worth of. But anyway, hopefully this time we won't have that problem. Now, rather recently, Screw Attack put up a video that was the rematch. Sorry about that. I have an old chair. A rematch of Goku versus Superman. And of course, Superman won. And of course, a lot of people were upset about that. And I'm guessing a lot of people are saying here that since I said Superman won, that must mean that I'm a fan of Superman. Not particularly. Superman's not a very relatable character. He's kind of boring. He's not exactly my. Oh, I don't want smooth. Let's see. There we go. Let's make. Ugh. Actually, black and white works the best. Okay. So, Superman's kind of a boring character to me. He is pretty literally just written to win. This is a problem I have with a lot of DC's characters, um, but I'll get around to that. There is a common trend on fans of various characters. This will go all the way back to the olden days where you talk about mythical heroes and who would win if they got into a fight or whatever. I'm pretty sure that the conversation came up of between a Egyptian and a Greek as to who would win between Horus and Heracles. I'm sure that conversation came up. So, in general, let's go focus on modern times. You have a lot of cases where people will say, my favorite character can be such and such a character. And they will not hear any reasons why that could not be the case. They will point to examples from fiction where their favorite character won out against somebody similarly powerful. They will point out a lot of different reasons based off their favorite character's capabilities. I've already mentioned history, resources, intelligence, all that sort of stuff. Most of this is going to be very anecdotal. It will depend very heavily on the what do you call it? Very heavily on the histories, because most people will not do the work to figure out the actual numbers involved. Um, it's kind of an investment thing. There is a tendency among people to think that it's their favorite character. And if their favorite character can't win this fight, then why is he or she my favorite character? I mean, it's my favorite character. They should win every fight because they're my favorite character. There are people who think this way. Uh, and again, they will point to a lot of stuff from the comics, the situations where somebody who is similarly on paper a lot more powerful than their favorite character, but who their favorite character beat in some form or fashion. Here's the problem with that. There is one reason why fights in a piece of fiction are won or lost. It's one reason. Very, really. The leading up to that one reason might be different, but there is only one reason. The writers decided that fight would be won or lost. That is why fights are won or lost in fiction. It's because the writer decided it would be that way. That's it. Once you come up with the fact that we want X character to win this fight, then all you have to do is manufacture the circumstances and situations so that they can. This is the thing about fiction. It is all a manufacture. Is all manufactured. It's all a contrivance. And you kind of look at me funny if I say that because isn't it bad for a fiction to be contrived? No, no. All contrived means was that it was a planned set of circumstances. It was produced. It was deliberately created. When we say fiction sounds contrived, we are absolutely correct because all fiction is contrived. The difference is when somebody says this is contrived, what they're saying is that it never produced a suspension of disbelief with them. It broke their suspension of disbelief. That it was not well written enough to make them forget that it was a piece of fiction. That it was not well written enough to make them be willing to drop their common sense for a time and just enjoy the story. That's what a person means when they say a movie or book or comic is contrived, because it's an absolute fact. The very definition of contrived, all fiction is contrived. It's an absolute fact. That's it. Whether you are consciously aware of it being contrived or not is really dependent on whether it's well written or not. But when it comes down to it, everything in fiction is decided by the writer or writers. Now, there might be a lot of different reasons leading up to that. They might be making a particular decision in the course of a story that they want this character to lose right now to explore the idea of them dealing with that loss. They might this might be a climatic battle and they want to have the hero win against all odds. It might be they choose this person to win because they know that this character is a favorite among fans and they want to please the fans so they can sell more books or movies or whatever. Or just, you have some writers that will just be writing what they want to write, and people will win or lose based off what they think fits the story. You will have other writers who will be writing based off instructions given to them by corporations or such. You will have writers who are writing based off what they think the fans want. But it's all the writer decides. This person wins, this person loses. This person lives, this person dies. This person dies off screen without you ever hearing about them. This person dies on screen, has a massively poignant death scene, but they were a really minor character up to then. This other major character dies off screen, and you see their body later and such like that. The matters, every event that happens in the story is absolutely artificial and constructed. Absolutely. If the authors put a lot of work into it, it's not immediately obvious. You can suspend your disbelief. You can accept. You just enjoy the story as a story. If you have to sit here and remind yourself this is a story, they failed a little, and probably most of my stories are like that. I just write really silly stuff myself. Very silly Saturday morning Stargate SG-1, stuff on the level of live action sci-fi, Saturday morning cartoons, and various anime all mixed up. That's what I write because that's what I enjoy. Anyway, so basing whether say Superman or Goku could win or lose against each other or any fight based off their past histories is flawed because all those past histories are artificial. They all started with the idea that we want, let's say the death of Superman. The death of Superman started with the idea we want Superman to die. So, hey, we want Superman to die because it'll be dramatic and everything, and then we can bring him back later and make lots of money. But we need a way for Superman to die. How about kryptonite? No, kryptonite's been done to death. It's boring. So, I mean, it's not exciting. Everybody kind of expects that. What we really need is for Superman to die in a big knockout, drag-out fight. But we don't really have anybody that can fight Superman on that level, except for maybe Darkseid. And if Darkseid comes and fights Superman, then the world wins. Then the world is doomed. So we can't do that. Oh, well, what about a random rampaging monster that was like deep in some government lab or something? That could be a thing. Why is it? Did the government create it? Nah. It's some alien creature that came down, was created by some alien scientist thing. And so you get Doomsday. All the circumstances that led up to Superman's death proceeded from the decision to kill Superman. All the circumstances in Batman versus Superman that led up to Batman winning proceeded from the decision that I want Batman to win. The result came first. It's a backwards causality. In real life, you don't see it. If you were in Fate Stay Night, this is like Fate Stay Night Lancer's Spear. The way Lancer's Spear works is a lethal blow is struck. A lethal blow is struck. And because a lethal blow is struck, the path the spear took to get to that lethal blow had to have happened. So the path is determined by the fact that a lethal blow is struck. It's not that usually in real life, the path determines whether the blow is lethal. With Lancer's Spear, what it is the fact that this is a lethal blow determines how the spear moved. It's backwards. That's the way fiction works. You decide the results. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're kind of leading and you let things go on your own. But most of the time, you have a particular result in mind. And maybe the details you decide along the way. But in fiction, you start with a result. This is what we want to happen. This is what we need to happen. This is what we want to happen. How can we make this happen? So, okay, another thing. This is real life causality. I am holding this die right now. I drop it, I let go, and it falls. It fell because I let go. That is real world causality. Now, fictional causality would say that the die falls. Why does the die fall? The die falls. Well, we could say the die falls because it is dropped. Well, was it dropped from? It's dropped from a hand. So in that case, the fall causes me to hold it. The fall causes me to drop it. That is backwards of real life. But that's the way fiction works. Because if you don't do that, your fiction goes all over the place. And you end up with something that is hard for people to swallow, and it's not successful. So, saying, well, another one is, Batman. I've already mentioned. It's like Batman can beat a video I saw a while back ago. Batman can beat the Avengers. Well, Batman can beat Superman. Batman can beat Darkseid. Batman can beat Ra's al Ghul. Batman can beat so and so. All of those instances started with Batman wins. How does Batman win? Batman wins this way. The causality is backwards. That's the way fiction works. It's not proof of who would win if a real live Batman met a real live Superman, or a real live Batman met a real live Spider-Man, to use the Screw Attack video, and for some reason fought to the death, which I'm never really fond of superheroes fighting each other. I don't mind, sparring or getting into a fight just for the heck of it. for the fun of it, because I did Amped Guard and all that. It's fun to get in a spar with somebody else, even if you're not very good and they're very. It's really kind of fun. So I have no idea really problem with superheroes fighting each other, as in sparring, as in for fun. But the idea of superheroes fighting each other because they want to defeat each other always makes me a little bit irritating, because every time I see that, what I know is the company got a bunch of messages saying, hey, what would happen if these two fought? I want to see these two fight. I want to see who would win, because you have a lot of these fans who think their favorite character should be able to beat this other character, and every time they've gotten into an argument about it with another friend who likes the other character, neither one of them has been able to find a proof of their opinion, because it's all just fiction. So they want the company to set up a circumstance for X character and X character to fight, so they can have proof. Haha, my character can win. That's the reason why superheroes fight in comics, is because fans want them to, and it makes money. That's pretty much the entire premise of Civil War. I know people are going to tell me that Civil War is all about government versus freedom versus order, chaos, individuality versus anarchy versus morality, and all this other kind of stuff that goes into it. But really, Civil War is a rehash of the X-Force versus X-Men storyline from the 90s, where the X-Force was working as a government mutant police force and got told to bring in the X-Men. And you had the X-Men as this vigilante force, which is legitimately illegal to act as vigilantes in that manner. And the government sent X-Force to collect the X-Men, and so you would have this whole government versus freedom type thing again. And they rehashed it and broadened it to the entire Marvel Earth with Civil War. It was just a rehash of that old storyline, so that they could have, let's have our favorite superheroes fight each other and see who would win. That was the reason. They wanted money. I am usually not against companies making money, but be honest, that's what Civil War was about. Okay. Any case, the entire premise of my character can beat your character is flawed. That's it. If you bother to sit down and look at the evidence of one character to another, very often you will find that the evidence of their raw physical capabilities say X character should win every time. And then the fans of Y character will say, but my character won at this instance and this instance, and that person's even more powerful than your character. Because they're pointing at a piece of fiction where the causality is, let's say Wolverine. Wolverine wins. How does Wolverine win? And they'll use that to say, Wolverine should beat Spider-Man. Whereas you look at actual stats of Wolverine to Spider-Man. Wolverine, aside from the healing factor, the unbreakable bones, and the senses and stuff, his actual agility and strength are not all that much higher than human. And I think they are within human maximums. Spider-Man is many times faster, many times stronger. He's a lot smarter, and he has the built-in equivalent of the Holy Grail of some martial arts styles. So the danger sense. Spider-Man should be able to beat Captain America, Batman, Wolverine, Hawkeye, pretty much anybody on that human or near human level. Spider-Man's in a league or two above that. Beast should not be able to beat Spider-Man. Spider-Man's much stronger than Beast. Spider-Man's much faster than Beast. He's roughly as intelligent, maybe smarter. Spider-Man's always played under his power level, because the fiction rules for Spider-Man say Spider-Man has a miserable life. How can we make Spider-Man's life miserable? He must struggle. So how can we make this fight a struggle for him? And that's why. It's the fiction. The fiction demands Spider-Man have a bad time, so Spider-Man has a bad time. The fiction demands Wolverine wins, so Wolverine wins. The fiction demands the Hulk wins, so the Hulk wins. The fiction demands Superman loses in this case, so Superman loses. The result causes the circumstances. Causality is backwards in fiction. Now, that is one of the reasons for showing how the proof that your character can win is flawed. But the entire concept is flawed. I guess some people choose their favorite character based off who would win a fight, but it seems a very hollow and shallow reason to choose a favorite character. The reason your favorite characters are your favorite characters is because they're the characters you care about. I don't really like Superman. Part of the reason is he's boring. They need him to be able to do something. They just invent some rigmarole thing about how, he's Kryptonian, so he can walk through walls. I am not joking. There is an old television show from way back when. I think it was George Reeves. Yes, there are two Reeves that played Superman. And there was a case where Superman learned to walk through walls. Superman has a lot of this. DC does a lot of this. Basically, the plot demands, therefore we will come up with circumstances to make the plot demands. And like I said, all fiction does that, but DC is really bad about being obvious about it, because they like to they'll do things like Superman getting powers on demand, like learning how to walk through walls, which he will then never use again, because he needed to walk through walls for this story, but he doesn't need to walk through walls anymore, so we would just forget he can walk through walls. DC's bad about that. Marvel's a little bit bad, is only a little bit better. Goku is on Dragon Ball is even a little bit better than that, but still not. It's a lot of Goku wins, Goku dies, goes get training from King Kai, comes back and wins. Yay! Yeah, sorry. If you want an example of a character that's as broken as Superman from anime, you would look to Kami Tenchi from Tenchi Muyo. The concept of Kami Tenchi is exactly the god living among mortals. The idea is that Tenchi has deliberately sealed away the part of himself that knows that he's this ultimate being that's beyond even the creators of the universe. Kami Tenchi is the actual truth of what Tenchi is, according to Tenchi Muyo. And at one point, they had Tenchi accidentally destroy the universe, and then immediately after, recreate it exactly as it was, to the point just before he accidentally destroyed it, to the smallest detail, including the way including people's histories and thoughts and emotions and all that. That's as broken as Superman or Superboy Prime, which is basically Superman, punching reality and reshaping it. It's basically the same exact thing. So if you had Kami Tenchi versus Superman, maybe, but it'll be very boring. It's basically just, I'm unlimited. I'm unlimited. Ah! Why? Okay. So, anyway, you do not choose a favorite character based on who can win. You choose your favorite character based on who you care about, and I guess how good they are in a fight is part of that. But think about it. The ones that, when stuff is happening in the movie or the film, and you're getting worried about whether your character will win, when you are getting worried about whether the writers have chosen to kill your character, when you are really interested to know whether your your favorite character wins out in the love triangle that they are involved in, like, as to point out Naruto and Hinata. I was always for Hinata. I went to, like, so I was kind of a little bit of a celebration when that became canon. But your favorite characters are going to be the ones that resonate with you, that make you have an emotional response. Um, and this really has nothing to do with how great they are, almost nothing to do with how great they are in a fight. How great they are in the fight is eye candy. That is just, oh, cool, look at these things. That is eye candy to the personalities involved. You resonate with characters that you understand and that you see a bit of yourself in them, or that you are empathic for and want to see do better. Like, for example, one of my favorite characters in Rama One Half is Kodachi Kuno, who really could not win a straight up fight with almost anybody else in her series that's a martial artist. So yeah, I one of my favorite characters is probably one of the weakest characters in the series. One of my other favorite characters is Nabiki Tendo, not a martial artist at all. I like Ranma. I like Akane. I like most of the characters. It's easier for me to list the characters I don't like, and I can sum that up in Tadawaki Kuno, who, from reading the manga, at some point just flat out tried to rape Rama a couple times. Um, it was really glossed over in the mangas, but there are a couple very dark points. Rurouni Takahashi is a lot darker than people think. People know Rama One Half, and they know her comedies, and then it comes out somewhat in Inuyasha, and I'm guessing, considering it's dealing with death, that it comes out in Rinne. But I mean, if you haven't heard of Mermaid Scar, Mermaid's Forest, or that, you really don't know how dark and twisted Rumiko Takahashi can get. And every once in a while, that will leak into some of her more lighthearted stuff, which is what happens with Tadawaki Kuno, in my opinion. And I don't like Haposai just on principle. He's not as bad as Tadawaki Kuno to me, but just on principle. Shampoo gets a little bit on my nerves because she's basically the female equivalent of the misogynist jock. She's just a female mirror of the misogynist star quarterback stereotype who expects everyone just to bow down and do what she says. But anyway, I'm digressing. If you wrap up your opinions on whether or not your character can win a fight as to being your favorite character, you will always be upset or disappointed some point or another, because the fights are determined by the writers. They're not determined by logic. Very often, fights in fiction go to the people who absolutely should not have won. I'm Batman all the time. Very often should not have won most of his fights, because realism is boring. Realism is predictable. And a little bit fiction is too, because you can pick up a Batman book and know he's going to win most of the time. Every once in a while he doesn't, and that's what makes it interesting. But he wins against things over and over and over and over again that really don't make sense about him winning that often. The odds really are against it every time, most of the time. Although if the odds aren't against it, it's not exciting. And this is why I tend to prefer shorter stories that have a beginning, a middle, and the end. And why I've kind of stopped reading things like Marvel Comics, DC, One Piece, Bleach, the things that are designed to go on forever and don't have a set end, because they eventually stretch my my suspension of disbelief, and I get to where, like I do with Batman, like I do with Spider-Man. Anyway, I like Spider-Man 2 a lot, but again, anyway. So, and you might have, especially comparing against across franchises, because the rules of reality in Marvel are different from the rules of reality in DC. The rules of reality in Tenchi Muyo are different from the rules of reality in Goku. There are some shallow similarities which allow for fan fictions to write crossovers, which can be very entertaining. But the rules of reality tend to be fundamentally different when you move from one fictional universe to the next, which makes it further impossible to really have a valid measure of who would win. So, but again, you should not be depending your choice of my favorite, based off who would win in a fight. Another of the big ones is Star Trek versus Star Wars. This has been going on forever, and I mean, Star Trek. When they talk about Star Trek versus Star Wars, they're usually talking Federation versus the Empire, or Federation versus the Alliance, or whatever. Here's the issue with me. I look at Star Wars. That is a galactic civilization. That civilization, there are some things on the outside of it, the Republic outside of the Empire, they're on the fringes, but the majority of the galaxy is populated and ruled by one entity. You have ships that can get from this part of the galaxy to the other part of the galaxy in days, a week, maybe days. And then you have Star Trek. Star Trek covers one quadrant of a galaxy. If you get into Voyager, they went into another quadrant and they spent most of their time trying to get to their home quadrant. So, yeah, it's one quadrant. And no one government owns all of that quadrant. The Federation has their thing, the Klingon Empire has their thing, the Romulans have their thing, the Cardassians have their thing. And it's all split up. And then you throw in, the Borg and the Dominion and all that. They're all they're all tiny fragments they're all tiny societies compared to the Empire or the Alliance or the Old Republic in Star Wars. It's like comparing India or China or the United States to Switzerland, really, or France. It's like if you were to ask if France and China fought, who would win? And it would be China. France doesn't have a chance. Sorry to say in real life, yeah, but anyway, I probably should stay away from real life. Apologies. But the same thing happens with the Star Wars versus Star Trek. You look at and then you look at some of the individual capabilities of the ships. The Jango Fett's ship in the prequels, which some people will say, oh, but the prequels don't count. But Jango Fett's, actually Boba Fett's ship in the original trilogy doesn't display too much, but we have some written official stats on it, which some people deny are actually official. That's how they get rid of that. But the written up stats of power consumption, shield power, amount of energy produced by weapons and all that are several orders of magnitude greater than what Star Trek can produce. The Jango Fett ship from the prequels is stronger than any of the versions of the Enterprise that have ever been. Any. It's a one-man fighter. It outpowers, outspeeds, outranges, better shields than any version of the Enterprise. And people will point out, you'll get in arguments of force, teleporter beams, teleport bombs into the ship, and it gets ridiculous. I mean, just looking at the evidence, numbers, resources, speed, range. Most Star Wars ships take place. Most Star Wars spaceship battles take place over a range of a solar system or planetary system. No, solar system is appropriate. The medium and short ranges for a lot of Star Wars ships are the long ranges for most of the Star Trek ships. Uh, the the number of people and ships available to Star Wars Empire or Republic dwarfs what is available to any one government. It is actually dwarfs what all the governments of the quadrants that of the all the governments we see in the any of the TV series can produce. And I know at this point some people are saying, "Well, you're obviously a Star Wars fan. You're not a Star Trek fan." If I had the money, I would own all of the Star Trek Next Generation. I do own all the Star Wars movies. I don't own the Clone Troopers stuff or any of the cartoons, but it's cheaper to get 6 movies than to get a whole TV series. And neither is my favorite when it comes to space operas. I like Lord of the Rings better than both of them. I like Lord of the Rings better than most things, which feels like, it's so silly. And they'll start talking about the movies, which are entertaining for what they are, but they're not they're not exact. They're not the books. The books are much better. But when it comes to space opera, my favorite would be either Babylon 5, most likely Babylon 5, or Stargate SG-1. I cannot conceive. I could probably conceive. If I were to sit down and think about it, I could probably come up with the circumstances that would make this feasible. But in general, I cannot. The idea of the Babylon 5 fleets against the Star Trek fleets, Babylon 5 loses. Yes, my favorite team, my favorite show, loses to Star Trek. I mean, look at it in terms of how close the different shows try to stick to actual physics. Star Wars writing pretty much ignores physics. It's Star Wars writing is the technology is magic masquerading as science. I'm not even talking about the Force. I'm talking about sound and vacuum. I'm talking about the way the way they do anything. All the stuff they have. Star Wars is basically magic that masquerades as technology. The Force is outright magic, so at least that's honest. But it's just everything, all of the technology is based around trying to produce awesome action scenes and huge, unbelievable amounts of power. That's the reason for Star Wars ships. Star Trek tries to stick a little bit closer to physics. It tries to deal a lot with what were considered hypothetical possibilities at the time it came out. And because it sticks closer to physics and Star Wars doesn't really care about physics, that's another reason why Star Wars kind of makes sense it would win. And again, to beat Star Wars, I would go to Gurren Teppan Lagann or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or Tenchi Muyo or other shows where physics is even less of a factor in how things work. And then you have Babylon 5, which tries to stick even closer to known physics and limits than what Star Trek did. And therefore, they ignored such things as force fields and such like that. So, or, independent warp speed, which we're kind of thinking might be might possibly be possible now with NASA's experiments, but far away from being practical. But yeah, so Babylon 5 loses to Star Trek. Star Trek loses to Star Wars. This does not make Star Wars better than Star Trek and Babylon 5. It doesn't. I like Babylon 5 better than both. I like Babylon 5 better than both. It's an opinion. It's not a fact. This is my belief of I like this show better than these two. And if I go to Stargate SG-1, and that's another case where the technology is magic masquerading as science, but it's kind of zigzags all over the place. Their engine speeds, they can travel to between two galaxies in around a week with some of their ships, which is hugely faster than a Star Wars ship. But their weapons and shields aren't anywhere up to where Star Wars ships were. Otherwise, every single their weapons and shields aren't up to the same level as their speed in comparison to Star Wars. Otherwise, every single SG-1 ship would be a pocket Death Star or Sunkiller, more likely. Any case. And I don't think the SG-1 would win either because, again, the zigzagging technology and power levels plus numbers, they don't really. There are maybe 3 or 4 ships at the highest point of the fleet that I know of in Star Trek universe. There were a lot more Goa'uld ships. There were a lot more Ori ships, but the numbers are just tiny compared to what is involved with Babylon 5 or Star Trek or Star Wars. But anyway, this is, I've gone around 40 minutes now. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. There is no point to figuring out who would win. There is no need to figure out who would win. Watching a cool fight scene is fun, but there's no reason to get emotional about it. In a lot of cases, if they're just going flat on the evidence of what things have been found to be possible, then somebody's going to have their favorite character lose every time. If they're basically somebody's writing and saying, I want my character to win, they will arrange circumstances for their character to win because, again, it's fiction. Causality is backwards. The end creates the beginning. The end creates the beginning. That's what you have to be aware of with fiction. Well, to be honest, you don't have to be aware of it unless you're actually making fiction. But yeah. Anyway, don't choose your favorite characters based on who's the toughest in a fight. If that is part of the reason why you like them, fine. But don't get your love of that character. Don't think you don't need to prove how much you like. You don't need to prove how great your character is. Your character is great to you. You don't need him beating some other character to prove he's great. It's unnecessary. It's counterproductive. It's silly. That's pretty much all there is to it. Fights in fiction happen the way they do because the writer makes them happen that way. It has nothing to do. The result of any piece of fiction has nothing to do with how good or competent or powerful the characters are. Those factors make a story more believable and easier to be accepted. But the results have nothing to do with the power or capabilities of a character. The results of a story have to do with what the writer wants the results to be. And what's important about a favorite character is how much you enjoy that character, not whether they can win a fight. Especially not against something outside their own franchise, where you're not even talking about the same universal constants. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Actually, at this point, that's my 45 minutes. I'm going to stop this now and hope there is no feedback. Talk to you later.